Hi, Ben Wood here from the BGS Groundhog team. Welcome to the second tutorial video in the playlist on how to use Groundhog to participate in the BGS Big Borehole Dig. If you watched the first video, we saw how to add the map that shows the locations of the currently available borehole locations that can be digitized as part of the Big Borehole Dig, and how to select those and add them into the project. So we can use that as our jumping off point for this video, where we'll see how to export that into an editable form that we can then start to code up the boreholes or digitize them. The first thing I'm going to do is to save the project, because we'll be working back into Groundhog later on. So I'm just going to work into a folder on my C drive for this. And I'm just going to give this a name. I'm going to call it BBD1. Now the Groundhog project is saved. The next step is to get the data in this project exported out into a way where we can easily edit and digitize the borehole logs. And we're going to use Excel for this. So to move out to Excel from the Groundhog project, we right-click on the Big Borehole Dig Session Borehole Dataset folder, and there's a menu here, Big Borehole Dig. You'll only see this menu option if you've generated this dataset using the techniques shown in the first video. Under here we have three options, but for the moment we're only interested in the first one, Generate Data Entry Worksheet. This will allow us to create an Excel workbook containing the locations that we've just brought in from the Web Map service. So I'm going to give this a name, BBD Demo 1, and click Save. And that should fire up Excel automatically with the data loaded. Let's just maximize that for a moment. If Excel doesn't fire off automatically, just head for the folder where you've saved the Excel and open it from there. So the Excel workbook has three tabs, which correspond to the three key top-level AGS data tables, because ultimately we're going to be donating this data back to BGS using an AGS format data transfer file. The first tab is the proj, which is the project level information. Then we have the loca or location data, which has the index or collar information for each borehole. And you can see that already has some data populated in, which is copied from the Groundhog project itself. And one of the fields is also the link to the scan. So if you forget what the borehole looks like, you can copy and paste this into your browser. And then we have the JOL table, which is blank, which is where we're going to do most of our coding work. I should stress this is not a tutorial on how to actually code borehole data. So we're basically going to be inventing data for this exercise just to show you the mechanism. So let's start with the proj. Every AGS file needs to have a proj group, so we need to populate this. Proj ID, you'll have to look at the borehole logs, the scans of the driller's logs to see if there's a project ID, or if there isn't, just use the name of the project as the ID. So I'm going to make some values up, ABC123. Project name. So let's actually go back to one of the logs that I'm working with here. So the project here is the Alexandra Dock Gates Kings Lynn. So I'd put that value in there. I'm not going to be too precious about what I enter into here because it's only for demo purposes. Obviously, when you're doing this real, take time to do it accurately. You're trying to record what's actually recorded on the scan. Proj underscore lock is the location. So that's a free text description of the location that you're working into. Proj underscore CLNT is the client. So I'm just going to make that up for the moment. Proj underscore cont is the contractor. And again, you need to be getting this information off the scanned log. If it isn't there, just skip it. And proj underscore eng is the engineer. Okay. And that's all we need in proj. Important point, you only ever need one row of data in proj because you should only be working on one real world project at a time. So if you get tempted to add a second row into here, stop, because you are obviously then adding boreholes into the same project within Groundhog that actually belong to multiple projects in the real world, which is not permitted in AGS. So let's skip down into Locus. So Groundhog's done some of the work for us here. You can see we have the local ID, so that's the unique ID for the borehole. We don't have the type. You can leave this blank, or if it's obvious or recorded on the log, please enter it. So for example, CP for cable percussion, or C for rotary. CP is probably a reasonable default if you're not sure and you want to populate something. Easting and northing are auto-populated. Local grid reference, always OSGB, because we're just dealing with data in GB grid for this exercise. And locagl, which is the ground level. Now this is key. You need to go back to the log because this is not recorded in the web map service. This data is not stored for this location yet. So you need to go back to the log and take a look at it. So you can see in this instance we've got a box of ground level, but there's no value in it. In that case, just leave that field blank. But if it was recorded, then you can obviously enter the value there. So I'm just going to make up some values. And then these other two columns are pre-populated. So the scan, obviously, if you're working on several boreholes here, you might get confused. So you can just take a copy of that and drop that into your browser of choice and check back in with the driller's log. Okay, so now starts the real work. If we head for the Joel tab, this is where we're going to put our interpretation, our geological interpretation of the borehole. Here we're going to be potentially creating multiple rows depending how many boreholes or locations we've decided to work on, and how detailed those logs are and how deep. But here's a key point. Head back to the loca table, and you're going to need to be using the exact loca ID across both of these worksheets. So I have one here with loca ID Alexandra.Kingslyn Norfolk 1, and that is the ID we're going to need to use. So grab that from the loca table, copy into the Joel, paste it into your first available row, and then we're ready to start coding up. So again, this is not a tutorial on how to actually code geological logs digitally, but essentially we're looking at these intervals here, and we're looking to code the information from the description and so on into the worksheet. So for example here, the top depth always starts at 0, and then here we can see we've got an interval 1.8 meters deep, so it's always depth increasing into the ground. So I put Joel top is always 0 for the first row in any log, and then the base of that interval is 1.8 meters. Joel underscore desk is the description. So what we're looking for here is for you to copy out the text that's on the driller's log. Here this is quite a long one, so I'm just going to make something up. Joel underscore ledge, you should have access to the document from the BGS website that describes the general workflow for the big borehole dig. That contains a list of the Joel ledge codes, but if you're working in industry, these are probably codes you're familiar with and have access to in other systems. These are the 3-digit numerical codes that refer to the lithological classifications. So they will be codes such as 201, 402, etc. So again, this is not a tutorial on the AGS legend codes, so I'm just going to make something up. And then the Joel information, which is optional, is if there's an actual layer code, like a named unit. So I'm going to put something in for that, call it Dave's layer. So some name for the unit rather than just a descriptive piece of information. So what we do then now is we look at the second interval, which goes from 1.8 to 3.8 meters. And very important, we need to duplicate the ID for the borehole each time. So you can see here we've got Alexandra Docks, Kings Lynn, Norfolk 1, Alexandra Docks, Kings Lynn, Norfolk 1. That's the primary key, and that's how the system is going to know which borehole this interval relates to. And I've forgotten now what the depth was, 3.8. Again, enter the description, enter the legend code, enter the jol if there is something, and so on. Once you've completed the interpretation for the first borehole, go back to the loca table and move to the next one. So here you can see we've got Alexandra Docks, Kings Lynn at Norfolk 3. So then we'd start with 3 and we'd be back to 0 at the top again here, etc. and so on. Okay. So that's the coding, and all you need to do then is hit save, and in the next video I'll show you how we bring that data back into Groundhog and pull that back out as an AGS file that can be donated to the ingestion portal at BGS.